Single dad janitor saves millionaire's autistic daughter. She's left speechless. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. The November rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hayes Technologies' 42nd floor as Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart through the executive suite. At 34, his back already ached from 12 years of night shifts, but he moved with quiet efficiency, making himself invisible as he'd learned to do. The corporate world didn't notice janitors unless something was dirty. You missed a spot. Victoria Hayes didn't look up from her laptop, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at a section of floor Marcus had cleaned 20 minutes ago. At 27, she was the youngest female CEO in the tech industry, her angular features and ice-blue eyes gracing the covers of Forbes and Fortune. And use the unscented cleaner. The lemon smell gives me headaches. Marcus nodded silently, retrieving the different bottle from his cart. He'd learned not to explain that he'd already used the unscented version, that the lemon scent drifted from the executive washroom 2 doors down. People like Victoria Hayes didn't care about explanations from people like him. The gala is in 3 days, Victoria continued, speaking into her phone now. Her attention already moved past him. I need the ballroom, absolutely perfect. We're announcing the merger with Patterson Industries, and every detail matters. Senator Williams will be there, the tech press, everyone who matters. She paused, listening. No, I can't bring Lily. You know I don't mix my personal life with business. She stays with the nanny. Marcus's hands stilled on the mop handle for just a moment. In 3 years of cleaning this office, he'd heard Victoria mention her daughter perhaps 5 times. The framed photos on other executives' desks were absent here. No child's drawing on the small refrigerator. No evidence that Victoria Hayes was anything but a ruthless businesswoman who'd built a tech empire on aggressive acquisitions and cutthroat negotiations. He finished the floor and moved toward the door, eager to escape to the peaceful silence of empty conference rooms. Marcus! Victoria's voice stopped him. She was looking at him now, really looking, as if seeing him for the first time. You have a daughter too, don't you? I heard you talking to someone on your break last month. Yes, Mom. Sophie. She's 7. Same age as mine. Something flickered across Victoria's face, too quick to identify. Does she go to public school? Roosevelt Elementary. It's a good school. Marcus kept his voice neutral, unsure where this unexpected conversation was leading. Lily goes to Westbrook Academy, $28,000 a year. Victoria stated it as fact, not bragging. She has special needs, autism, high functioning, but she needs structure, predictability. For just a moment, her corporate armor cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Being a single parent is harder than running a company. Marcus found himself responding before he could stop. Being a single parent is the hardest job there is, Mom, no matter how much money you have. Their eyes met, and for 3 heartbeats, something passed between them, a recognition of shared struggle that transcended the vast economic canyon separating their lives. Then Victoria's phone rang, and the moment shattered like dropped crystal. That's all. She turned away, dismissing him as she answered the call. Yes, Senator, I received your concerns about the merger terms. Marcus wheeled his cart into the hallway, the brief connection already fading into the fluorescent-lit reality of his world. He had 6 more floors to clean before his shift ended at 4 a.m. Then, a 2-hour commute on 3 different buses to reach the small apartment he shared with Sophie in Queens. His daughter would be waking up soon, and Mrs. Chen from downstairs, who watched her overnight, would need to leave for her own job. The elevator chimed, and Marcus stepped inside, his reflection ghostly in the polished doors. He looked tired, older than 34. His janitor's uniform was clean but worn, his hands rough from chemicals and hard work. He thought about Victoria Hayes's perfect suit, probably worth more than his monthly rent, and her casual mention of school tuition that exceeded his annual salary. 2 people, 2 single parents, 2 7-year-old daughters. but worlds that could never touch. Marcus had no way of knowing that in 72 hours, those worlds would collide in fire and blood, and nothing would ever be the same again. The gala preparation consumed Hayes Technologies for 3 days. Marcus found himself assigned to overtime shifts, ensuring every surface gleamed for the 500 guests who would fill the building's event spaces Friday night. The ballroom occupied the entire 35th floor, a cathedral of glass and steel with views stretching across Manhattan's glittering skyline. "My daughter's asking about you," Mrs. Chen told Marcus Wednesday morning when he finally made it home, her kind face creased with concern. "She wanted to know why you can't come to her school play Thursday night. I told her you have to work." Guilt gnawed at Marcus's chest. Sophie's class was performing The Wizard of Oz, and she'd been practicing her lines as a munchkin for weeks. But the overtime pay from the gala would cover her new winter coat and the reading tutor she desperately needed. Sophie struggled with reading, the letters dancing on the page in ways that frustrated her to tears. "I'll make it up to her," Marcus promised, knowing the words were hollow. He'd been making promises to make things up to Sophie since her mother left 4 years ago, disappearing one morning with nothing but a note saying she couldn't handle being a mother anymore. Thursday night, while Sophie took her bow on an elementary school stage, Marcus polished the marble floors of the ballroom until they reflected the chandeliers like mirrors. The event coordinator, a sharp woman named Patricia, stalked through the space with a clipboard, pointing out microscopic flaws that needed correction. "The CEO is bringing her daughter tomorrow," Patricia announced to the setup crew, her voice carrying across the vast room. "First time ever. Apparently the girl's nanny got sick, and Ms. Hayes couldn't find a replacement on short notice. Can you believe it? The most important event of the year, and she's bringing a kid." Her tone made clear what she thought of that decision. Marcus paused in his work, surprised. Victoria Hayes never brought her daughter anywhere public. He'd seen the carefully cultivated image in business magazines, brilliant, focused, unencumbered by personal complications. Bringing an autistic 7-year-old to a high-stakes corporate event seemed completely out of character. "She's setting up a quiet room," Patricia continued, reading from her tablet. "Conference room 35B, away from the main event. The kid can stay there with an aide while the adults do business. Smart solution, actually." Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth, November pretending to be September. Marcus finished his regular shift at 4 a.m., went home to make Sophie breakfast and get her off to school, then returned to Hayes Technologies at 2 p.m. for the final preparations. His body ached with exhaustion, but the overtime check would be worth it. The guests began arriving at 6. Marcus watched from the service corridor as Manhattan's elite stepped from limousines, designer gowns, and tailored tuxedos filling the lobby. He'd been assigned to work during the event itself, staying invisible while ensuring everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. Victoria Hayes arrived at 6:30, and Marcus barely recognized her. She wore a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than his car was worth back when he'd owned a car. Her hair swept up in an elaborate style, diamonds at her throat and ears. She looked like she'd stepped from a movie screen, powerful and untouchable. But it was the little girl holding her hand that made Marcus's breath catch. Lily Hayes was small for 7, with her mother's sharp features softened by childhood and huge brown eyes that darted nervously around the crowded lobby. She wore a white dress with pink flowers and clutched a worn stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her free hand flapped occasionally at her side, a self-soothing motion Marcus recognized from the special education teachers he'd spoken to about Sophie's learning difficulties. Victoria bent down, bringing herself to her daughter's eye level. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she forced her voice to stay calm and steady. "Remember what we practiced, Lily. You're going to stay in the special room with Miss Jennifer. It's quiet there. You can watch your tablet. I'll check on you every 30 minutes. Lily didn't respond verbally, but her hand flapping increased. The stuffed rabbit pressed tighter against her small chest. "I know you don't like new places," Victoria continued, her corporate confidence cracking around the edges. But Mommy needs you to be brave tonight, just for a few hours. Can you do that for me? A young woman in casual clothes approached, Miss Jennifer presumably, and offered Lily a warm smile. I have the quiet room all set up. Your mum showed me pictures of your favorite things. I have the weighted blanket you like. Marcus retreated into the service corridor as they passed, heading toward the elevator. He caught a brief glimpse of Victoria's face as she walked with her daughter, and what he saw surprised him. Fear, vulnerability, love so fierce it was almost painful to witness. The Ice Queen CEO was just a mother, terrified of failing her child. The gala began at 7. Marcus moved through the margins, refilling water stations, checking restrooms, responding to small crises that the guests never noticed. The merger announcement came at 8:30, champagne flowing as Victoria Hayes and Arthur Patterson shook hands for the cameras. Senator Williams gave a speech about innovation and American industry. The tech press took notes and photos. At 9:15, Marcus was refilling the water station near the west windows when he smelled it, a sharp, chemical scent that didn't belong. He paused, trying to identify the source, his nose twitching. Years of working with cleaning chemicals had made him sensitive to unusual odors. The smell grew stronger. Marcus set down his water pitcher and followed the scent to a service closet near the emergency stairs. Thin smoke curled from beneath the door. His hand touched the handle just as the fire alarm exploded into ear-shattering life. Chaos erupted instantly. 500 guests in formal wear suddenly pushing toward exits. The orderly gala transforming into controlled panic. Security guards materialized, directing the flow of people. Patricia, the coordinator, barked orders into a radio. The sprinkler system activated, drenching everything in seconds. Marcus stood frozen for a crucial heartbeat, his mind racing. The fire was in the service area, not the main ballroom. The guests would evacuate safely, but the smoke he could see curling from under the closet door was already thick, black, wrong. This wasn't a small electrical fire. Then his brain connected 3 pieces of information that turned his blood to ice. The quiet room was on this floor. Conference room 35B, away from the main event. Lily Hayes was alone with her aide, while 500 people rushed for the main exits and smoke was already filling the service corridors. Marcus didn't think. He ran. The service corridor was filling with smoke. Faster than should have been possible, Marcus pulled his shirt over his mouth and nose, his eyes already streaming tears. The fire alarm's wail disoriented him, but he'd cleaned these halls for 3 years. He knew every turn, every door. Conference room 35B was at the far end of the east corridor, deliberately isolated from the party. Marcus covered the distance in seconds that felt like hours. Smoke poured from a ventilation grate above his head, the fire spreading through the building's infrastructure with terrifying speed. He reached the conference room door and twisted the handle, locked from the inside, the aide following security protocols. Marcus pounded on the door with both fists. "Open up! Fire! We need to evacuate!" Nothing. The alarm was too loud, or they couldn't hear over the chaos. Marcus stepped back and drove his shoulder into the door once, twice. On the third impact, the lock gave way, and he stumbled into the room. Miss Jennifer sat on the floor, her face white with panic, arms wrapped around Lily Hayes. The little girl was covering her ears, eyes squeezed shut, rocking back and forth. The stuffed rabbit lay abandoned beside them. "We can't get her to move," Jennifer shouted over the alarm. "She shut down when the noise started. I tried to carry her, but she fought me. She's too scared." Marcus crossed the room and knelt in front of Lily, bringing his face level with hers. Her eyes were screwed so tight that tears leaked from the corners. Her hands pressed hard against her ears, blocking out the overwhelming sensory assault. He'd seen Sophie do this once, when fireworks on the 4th of July became too much, the world narrowing to survival, everything else disappearing behind walls of fear and sensory overload. Marcus gently touched Lily's shoulder. She flinched, but didn't pull away. He kept his voice low and calm, speaking directly into the small gap between her hands and ear. "Lily, my name is Marcus. I'm a friend. I'm going to help you get somewhere quiet and safe. But I need you to trust me for just a few minutes. Can you do that?" No response. "No." The smoke was getting thicker, seeping under the door Marcus had broken open. They had maybe 2 minutes before the room became a death trap. "Your mommy is waiting for you outside," Marcus tried again. "She's probably really scared right now. She needs to know you're okay. Will you help me get you to your mommy?" Lily's eyes opened just slightly. They were huge and dark and terrified, but focused on him now, aware. "I'm going to pick you up," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I'll carry you like a koala bear. Remember those? You can hold on tight and hide your face against my shoulder. It'll be loud and scary, but I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." He didn't wait for agreement. Marcus scooped Lily into his arms, and after one moment of resistance, she wrapped herself around him like he'd suggested, her face buried in his neck, her small body trembling. He grabbed the stuffed rabbit with his free hand and thrust it toward her. She clutched it instinctively. "Jennifer, stay close to me," Marcus ordered, moving toward the door. "Hold onto my belt if you need to. We're going to the east stairwell. It should still be clear." They emerged into the corridor and Marcus's heart sank. The smoke was a living wall now, black and choking. The fire had spread impossibly fast. Behind them, through the haze, he could see orange flames licking at the ceiling. They had one chance. The east stairwell was 30 feet away. Marcus put his head down and ran. The heat was enormous, pressing against his skin like a physical force. Lily's small body trembled against him, her arms locked around his neck in a death grip. Marcus felt, rather than saw, Jennifer behind him, her hand fisted in his shirt. 20 feet. 15. His lungs were burning, screaming for clean air. 10 feet from the stairwell door, a section of ceiling collapsed between them and safety. Burning debris rained down, and Marcus twisted his body to shield Lily, feeling the searing kiss of embers on his back and arms. Pain exploded across his shoulders, but he didn't stop moving. He couldn't see the door anymore through the smoke and falling debris, but his feet knew the way. His outstretched hand found the door handle, and he yanked it open. Cool, clear air rushed out from the stairwell, and Marcus literally fell through the opening, Jennifer tumbling after him. The door slammed shut behind them, muffling the roar of the fire. Marcus collapsed against the wall, Lily still clutched against his chest. His back felt like someone had laid hot coals against his skin. His lungs heaved, trying to clear the smoke. "Down," Marcus gasped. "We have to. Keep moving. Fire spreads up." They descended the stairs, Marcus moving on autopilot now, his body operating on pure adrenaline. Lily hadn't made a sound since he'd picked her up, but he could feel her heart hammering against his chest, could feel her breathing, alive, safe. They emerged into the lobby 15 minutes later to find organized chaos. Fire trucks filled the street, their lights painting everything in flashes of red and white. Emergency responders directed evacuees to safe zones. News vans were already setting up, cameras filming the smoke pouring from the 35th floor. Marcus stumbled out of the stairwell, and suddenly Victoria Hayes was there, materializing from the crowd of evacuees like an avenging angel. Her elegant gown was soaked and streaked with soot. Her elaborate hairstyle collapsed, mascara running down her face in black rivers. She looked nothing like the untouchable CEO. She looked like every terrified parent Marcus had ever seen. "Lily!" Victoria's voice cracked on her daughter's name. She was running toward them, her hands outstretched. Marcus carefully transferred the little girl into her mother's arms. Lily immediately burrowed into Victoria, her small body finally relaxing, finally safe. Victoria sank to her knees, right there in the middle of the lobby, clutching her daughter and sobbing with a rawness that made Marcus's chest ache. "You're okay. You're okay. You're okay." Victoria chanted it like a prayer, her hands running over Lily's body, checking for injuries. "Mommy's here. You're safe now." It was only then that Marcus registered the pain. Really registered it. His back and arms were screaming, his lungs raw from smoke inhalation. He looked down and saw that his uniform shirt was scorched, holes burned through the fabric. Underneath, he could see angry red skin, some areas already blistering. A paramedic appeared at his elbow. "Sir, you need to sit down. Those are second-degree burns. We need to treat them immediately." Marcus let himself be led to an ambulance. As the paramedic cut away his ruined shirt and began applying cool gel to the burns, Marcus watched Victoria Hayes rock her daughter in the middle of the smoky lobby, watched her whisper words of comfort and love, watched her forget that anyone else existed. "That was incredibly brave," the paramedic said, working on Marcus's shoulders. "You saved that little girl's life. And the aides, the fire department said that section of the 35th floor was completely engulfed within 3 minutes of your evacuation. No one who stayed would have survived." Marcus didn't feel brave. He felt exhausted and hurt and worried about whether Sophie would be scared if she heard about the fire on the news before he could call her. "Is she your daughter?" the paramedic asked, nodding toward Lily. "No, I'm just the janitor." But when Marcus looked up, he found Victoria Hayes staring directly at him across the chaos, her daughter still clutched in her arms. And the expression on her face was something Marcus couldn't quite name. Shock, gratitude, and something else. Something that looked almost like shame. Their eyes held for a long moment. Then Victoria rose to her feet, Lily still attached to her like a barnacle, and began walking toward Marcus's ambulance. What she said next would begin unraveling a mystery that neither of them knew existed, one that would rewrite both their histories, and reveal that Marcus's random act of heroism was anything but random. But in that moment, as smoke poured from the building behind them, and sirens wailed and cameras flashed, Victoria Hayes did something she'd never done in 3 years of employing Marcus Chen. She really saw him, not the janitor, not the invisible man who cleaned her floors, but the person who'd risked everything to save what mattered most to her. And once she started truly seeing Marcus, she would discover things about him and about herself that would change everything. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Victoria Hayes sat in a plastic chair that probably cost less than her shoes, her ruined designer gown drawing curious stares from other patients. Lily slept in her arms, finally relaxed after the trauma of the evening, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Victoria hadn't let her daughter go for even a moment since Marcus had handed her over. Across the room, separated by 20 feet and an invisible wall of social class, Marcus sat with his back carefully positioned away from the chair. The paramedics had treated his burns at the scene, but the ER doctor insisted on a full evaluation and professional dressing of the wounds. His supervisor from Hayes Technologies had arrived at the hospital, worried and guilty, promising that the company would cover all medical expenses. Victoria watched Marcus through exhausted eyes, really studying him for the first time. She'd seen him hundreds of times over the past 3 years, but she'd never actually looked. He was taller than she'd realized, maybe 6'1", with broad shoulders and the kind of quiet strength that came from physical labor. His face was Asian American, probably Chinese based on his last name, with strong features and dark eyes that seemed older than 34. Tired eyes. Kind eyes, eyes that hadn't hesitated before running into a burning building to save a child who meant nothing to him. "Ms. Hayes," Erdade, a woman in a hospital administrator's badge, approached, clipboard in hand. "I need to get some information for Mr. Chen's admission. He listed you as his emergency contact since his regular contact is his young daughter." "Of course, whatever he needs." Victoria's voice came out hoarse from smoke and screaming. The administrator consulted her clipboard. "Does Mr. Chen have health insurance through Hayes Technologies?" Victoria's mind went blank. She had no idea. Why had she never known that? I'm not sure. He's employed by our facilities department. According to our records, he has the basic catastrophic coverage only." That won't cover burn treatment, the specialist consultation, or the medication he'll need for recovery. We're looking at approximately $18,000 out of pocket. The number hit Victoria like a physical blow. $18,000. For burns he'd received saving her daughter. Burns that would leave scars, that would cause him pain for weeks, that might affect his ability to do the physical labor his job required. "Put it on my account," Victoria said immediately. "All of it, and upgrade whatever coverage he needs going forward." "Are you sure? That's quite generous for—" "He saved my daughter's life." Victoria's voice turned sharp, commanding. $18,000 is nothing. It's insulting. Add another $50,000 to his account for recovery expenses, lost wages, whatever he needs. The administrator's eyebrows rose, but she made notes on her clipboard. "Very well, Ms. Hayes. I'll process the authorization immediately." After the woman left, Victoria continued watching Marcus. He sat slumped in his chair, his eyes closed, his face drawn with pain and exhaustion. His hands, resting on his thighs, were rough with calluses and old scars, hands that had worked hard for many years. How did she know so little about the people who made her empire function? Victoria built her success on knowing everything, on gathering information and using it strategically. She could recite the quarterly earnings of every competitor, knew the personal weaknesses of every business rival, had detailed profiles on every executive in her company. But she couldn't tell you anything about Marcus Chen, except that he had a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie, and he cleaned her office quietly and efficiently. "Mr. Chen," a nurse appeared. "We're ready for you now." Marcus stood slowly, wincing. He followed the nurse through the double doors that led to the treatment area. Victoria stayed in her waiting room chair, Lily heavy and warm in her arms, and thought about heroes. She'd expected the senator to be heroic tonight. He'd certainly positioned himself as such in his speech, talking about American courage and innovation. She'd expected Arthur Patterson to be impressive during the merger announcement, consolidating power and influence. She'd expected herself to be in control, commanding, unshakable. Instead, the real hero had been a janitor named Marcus Chen, who nobody noticed until he'd run into fire. 2 hours later, Marcus emerged from the treatment area with his torso wrapped in white bandages, his arms carefully dressed. The doctor spoke to him in low tones, handing over prescription papers and care instructions. Marcus nodded, his face pale with pain despite whatever medications they'd given him. Victoria stood, carefully settling a still sleeping Lily more securely in her arms. She crossed the waiting room, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. "Marcus," he turned, surprise flickering across his exhausted features. Up close, Victoria could see the redness around his eyes from smoke exposure, the small cuts on his face from flying debris, the way he held his body carefully to minimize pain from the burns. "Ms. Hayes, is Lily okay?" "She's fine because of you." Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "The hospital told me about the medical costs. I've covered everything. It's the least I can do. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do, and it's not enough. It will never be enough." Victoria took a breath, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. "Thank you for saving my daughter, for risking your life, for being braver than any of us in our designer clothes and our business deals. Thank you." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Victoria shook her head firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have run away from the fire, not toward it. You didn't even hesitate." "She's a kid, someone's daughter." Marcus's voice was simple, matter of fact. How could I leave her there? The question hung in the air between them. How could he leave her there, as if it was obvious, as if there was no other choice, as if a child's life was worth more than his own safety, regardless of whose child it was? Victoria thought about the executives who'd pushed past her in their rush to evacuate, about the security guards who'd herded people out according to protocol but hadn't thought to check isolated rooms, about herself, trapped in the crowd flow, unable to get back inside while her daughter was still up there. My car is outside, Victoria said. Let me give you a ride home. It's the middle of the night and you're hurt. I take the bus. Please, let me do this one small thing. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. They walked out into the cool November night, Victoria's driver materializing instantly when he saw her emerge. The limousine felt absurdly luxurious under the circumstances, like driving away from tragedy in a parade float. Marcus carefully lowered himself into the seat, trying not to wince. Victoria settled Lily on her lap, and the driver pulled smoothly into traffic. "Where do you live?" Victoria asked. "Queens, 84th Street, near Roosevelt Avenue." Marcus provided the address, and Victoria saw him watching her reaction, waiting for judgment about the neighborhood. She gave none. "How long have you worked at Hayes Technologies?" 3 years in January. Before that, I worked at a hospital in Jersey. Before that, various cleaning companies. Marcus spoke matter-of-factly, no shame or pride in his voice. "I dropped out of college after my first year when Sophie was born. Her mother left when Sophie was 3, so it's been just us for 4 years now. You were 26 when you became a single father." 27. Sophie came a little earlier than expected. A small smile crossed Marcus's face. "Best surprise of my life, though. Everything I do is for her." Victoria felt something twist in her chest. "I was 20 when I had Lily." Her father. He wasn't prepared to be a parent. Didn't want a child to interfere with his career trajectory. The bitterness leaked through despite her attempts to sound neutral. He signed away all parental rights before she was born. Offered me money to terminate the pregnancy, then more money to never contact him again when I refused. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Lily is the best thing that ever happened to me." Victoria looked down at her sleeping daughter, brushing hair back from her flushed face. "But I spend so much time trying to prove I can do both, be a mother and a CEO, that sometimes I wonder if I'm doing either well." The words escaped before Victoria could stop them. She never admitted weakness, never showed vulnerability, never let anyone see past the armor she'd constructed so carefully. But exhaustion and trauma had stripped away her usual defenses. "You brought her tonight," Marcus observed. "When your nanny got sick, you could have cancelled or found someone else. But you brought her with you to the most important business event of your year. That says something. It says I'm a terrible mother who put my daughter in danger for a business deal." Victoria's voice cracked. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't been brave—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "But I was there, and she's safe." Marcus's voice was gentle. "You can't torture yourself with what-ifs. Trust me, I've tried. Every day I drop Sophie at school, I think about all the things that could go wrong. Every time I work a double shift and she's with a babysitter, I imagine disasters. Parenting is just controlled terror wrapped in love." Despite everything, Victoria found herself almost smiling. That's exactly right. Controlled terror wrapped in love. They rode in silence for a few minutes, the city lights streaming past the windows. Victoria's phone had been buzzing constantly since they left the hospital. Messages from board members, the press team, insurance companies, investigators. She ignored all of it. For once in her life, business could wait. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Why did you become a CEO so young?" "Because I never wanted to depend on anyone ever again." The answer came immediately, bypassing Victoria's usual careful filters. "My parents were wealthy, but they controlled everything with money. When I got pregnant at 20, they gave me an ultimatum: terminate the pregnancy and finish at Harvard Business School with their support, or keep the baby, and they'd cut me off completely. You kept the baby. I kept my daughter and built an empire to prove they were wrong, that I didn't need them, or their money, or their approval." Victoria looked down at Lily. "Maybe that makes me petty. Maybe I should have just walked away and been happy, but I wanted them to see what they gave up, who they rejected. Do they regret it? I don't know. I haven't spoken to them in 7 years." The admission hurt more than Victoria expected. "They send a card on Lily's birthday every year, never signed. Just a card with money inside, like that makes up for not knowing their granddaughter." The limousine pulled to a stop outside a modest apartment building in Queens. The neighborhood was quiet, working class, the kind of place where people minded their own business and everyone had two jobs. A world away from Victoria's penthouse in Tribeca, Marcus reached for the door handle, then paused. "Ms. Hayes, Victoria, what you built is impressive. And what you're building with Lily, that matters more than any business deal. Don't let tonight make you doubt yourself." "How do you do it?" Victoria heard herself ask. "The single-parent thing, the working multiple jobs, never enough money, always exhausted thing. How do you keep going?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand still on the door handle. "You just do, because they need you, and giving up isn't an option. Some days you're barely holding it together. Some days you cry in the shower so they can't hear you. But you show up the next morning and you try again, because they deserve your best even when your best is just survival mode." The honesty of it hit Victoria like a wave. Here was someone who understood. Not the wealthy executives who hired nannies and life coaches. Not the society mothers who judged her for working instead of volunteering at school, but someone who lived the same reality she did, just with much fewer resources and much higher stakes. "Thank you," Victoria said again, "for everything. And Marcus, take all the time you need to recover, full pay, of course. And when you come back, I'd like to talk to you about a different position in the company. Something that uses more than your ability to clean." Marcus's eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I want to. You clearly have qualities that my company needs. Intelligence, courage, the ability to think clearly in crisis. Those skills are wasted on night shift janitorial work. I appreciate it, but I don't have a college degree. Neither did Steve Jobs. Neither did about 40% of successful entrepreneurs. A degree is just a piece of paper. You proved tonight what you're really made of." Victoria shifted Lily slightly, her arms aching from holding her daughter for hours. "Think about it. We'll talk when you're healed." Marcus nodded slowly, then climbed carefully out of the car. Victoria watched him walk toward his building, moving stiffly from pain and exhaustion. A man who'd risked everything for a stranger's child, then went home to his own small apartment to continue his quiet life of struggle and sacrifice. The limousine pulled away, carrying Victoria and Lily back toward their penthouse. But Victoria couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Chen, about the gulf between their lives, and about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together in fire and smoke. She had no way of knowing that fate wasn't finished with them yet, that the fire was only the beginning, that Marcus Chen's connection to her life ran deeper than either of them imagined, stretching back decades to secrets buried and promises made, and that when the truth finally emerged, it would shatter everything Victoria thought she knew about her own history. The fire investigation began the Monday after the gala. Victoria spent the weekend at home with Lily, cancelling all meetings and ignoring the flood of emails demanding her attention. For the first time in 7 years, she put her daughter ahead of her company, and the world didn't end. They built pillow forts in the living room. They watched Lily's favorite movies 3 times in a row. They baked cookies that turned out slightly burned, but tasted perfect anyway. Lily didn't speak much, she rarely did, but she stayed close to Victoria, her small hand frequently reaching out to touch her mother's arm or leg, reassuring herself that Victoria was still there. On Sunday evening, after Lily finally fell asleep, Victoria stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Manhattan. The city glittered below her, thousands of lights representing thousands of lives she'd never know. Somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was probably sitting in his modest apartment, his burns healing slowly, taking care of his own daughter. 2 parallel lives that had briefly, violently intersected. Victoria found herself wondering what would have happened if they'd never met, if there had been no fire, if she'd continued employing Marcus for years without ever really seeing him. The thought made her feel vaguely sick. Her phone rang. Arthur Patterson, the CEO she'd been merging with during the gala. Victoria almost didn't answer, but corporate responsibilities had a way of reasserting themselves. "Victoria, thank God you're all right. I've been trying to reach you all weekend. I needed time with my daughter, Arthur. I'm sure you understand. Victoria kept her voice neutral, professional. Of course, of course. The fire was a terrible tragedy. But Victoria, we have a problem. The fire investigators found evidence of arson. Someone deliberately set that fire in the service corridor using an accelerant. This wasn't an accident. Victoria's blood ran cold. Arson? Who would? The investigators are being tight-lipped, but there are rumors. Some people are saying it might have been connected to the merger, that someone wanted to disrupt the announcement, maybe sabotage Hayes Technologies' reputation or stock value. That's insane. Who benefits from that? Plenty of people, if you think about it. Competitors who don't want us to consolidate market share. Investors who bet against us. Even someone inside the company who opposed the merger. Arthur's voice dropped lower. Victoria, I need to know, is your house in order? Could this have been an inside job? The question felt like a slap. My people are loyal, Arthur. We're a family at Hayes Technologies. So was Brutus to Caesar. Arthur sighed. Look, I'm not accusing anyone. But the investigators are going to be asking hard questions. Make sure you have good answers. After the call ended, Victoria stood at the windows for a long time, her mind racing. Arson. Deliberate. Someone had tried to burn down her building, had nearly killed her daughter, all for what? Money, revenge, corporate sabotage. She thought about the service closet where the fire started, about how quickly it had spread through the infrastructure, about Marcus smelling the chemical accelerant before the alarms even sounded. Marcus, the janitor who knew every service corridor, every closet, every entrance and exit, who had access to every floor, every room, who worked nights when the building was mostly empty. Victoria's analytical mind immediately went there, examining the possibility with cold logic. Could Marcus have set the fire? Could his heroic rescue have been staged to cover his involvement? But even as the thoughts formed, Victoria rejected them. She'd seen Marcus's face when he'd brought Lily out of that building. The burns on his back and arms were real, painful, severe. No one would willingly endure that kind of injury for a cover story. And more than that, she'd heard the raw honesty in his voice when he talked about parenting, about sacrifice, about doing whatever it took to protect your child. That wasn't the voice of someone who'd endanger children for money. Still, the investigators would look at him, would see the same connections she'd just made, would question him, suspect him, perhaps even arrest him. Victoria needed to make sure that didn't happen, not to the man who'd saved her daughter. Monday morning brought a flood of activity. Victoria returned to Hayes Technologies to find the 35th floor cordoned off with crime scene tape, investigators in protective suits examining the burned remains of her ballroom. The building smelled of smoke and chemicals, the evidence of trauma written in soot and char marks. Her executive team gathered for an emergency meeting in a conference room 20 floors below the damage. Faces were pale, voices subdued. The fire had rattled everyone, made them aware of their own mortality in ways that quarterly earnings reports never could. The preliminary investigation confirms arson, Victoria's head of security reported. A former FBI agent named Richard Stone. The accelerant was industrial grade, probably stolen from a construction site or warehouse. The fire was started in a service closet that contained electrical infrastructure, allowing it to spread quickly through the walls and ventilation system. Who had access to that closet? Victoria asked, keeping her voice level. Maintenance staff, janitorial crews, building engineers, about 35 people on the access list. Stone consulted his tablet. The investigators are interviewing all of them. They're also looking at security footage from the week before the event, trying to identify anyone who showed unusual interest in that area. I want full cooperation with the investigation, but I also want our people protected. Make sure everyone has legal representation if they need it. No one gets thrown under the bus because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. The meeting continued for 2 hours, covering insurance, repairs, public relations, and contingency plans. Throughout it all, Victoria found her mind drifting to Marcus. She'd texted him Sunday night to check on his recovery, and he'd responded briefly that he was healing and that Sophie was taking good care of him. The image of a 7-year-old girl trying to care for her injured father made Victoria's chest ache. Sophie probably didn't understand the severity of her father's injuries, didn't know how close she'd come to losing him, just like Lily didn't fully understand how close she'd come to dying in that fire. After the meeting, Victoria pulled Richard Stone aside. "The janitor who rescued my daughter, Marcus Chen. He's going to be a suspect, isn't he?" Stone's expression confirmed her suspicions. He had access, opportunity and knowledge of the building's infrastructure. The investigators will definitely want to talk to him extensively. He saved Lily's life. He ran into a burning building and got severe burns doing it. That's not the behavior of an arsonist, unless it was staged to deflect suspicion. Stone held up a hand when Victoria's face darkened. "I'm not saying I believe that. I'm saying that's what the investigators will consider. They have to look at every angle. Then look at this angle. Who benefits from the fire? Marcus Chen makes $38,000 a year. He has no stock in the company, no financial motive, but there are plenty of people who had millions to gain if this merger fell apart or if Hayes Technologies looked vulnerable." Stone's eyes sharpened. "You're thinking corporate sabotage? I'm thinking we should look at who actually had motive, means and opportunity. Not just opportunity." No, Victoria's voice turned hard. "Marcus Chen is under my personal protection. Make sure the investigators know that. And Richard, I want to know who really started that fire." "Understood. I'll dig deeper into the corporate angle." Stone paused. "For what it's worth, I don't think your janitor did it either. I saw the burn patterns on his back. No one stages that kind of injury." After Stone left, Victoria sat alone in the conference room, her fingers drumming on the polished table. Someone had tried to burn down her building, had nearly killed her daughter, had put hundreds of people in danger, and Victoria was going to find out who. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. "Ms. Hayes, Victoria, please. After everything, I think we're past formalities." She took a breath. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The pain medication helps. Sophie thinks I'm a superhero now, which is nice." A pause. "Is everything okay? You sound stressed." "The fire was arson. Deliberately set. The investigators are going to want to interview you." Silence on the other end. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was careful. "They think I did it. They have to investigate everyone with access. But Marcus, I know you didn't do this. And I'm going to make sure they know it too. You don't have to protect me. Yes, I do. You saved my daughter. And more than that, you're a good person who's being targeted because you were in the wrong place at the right time." Victoria stood, pacing to the window. "I'm hiring a lawyer for you, the best criminal defense attorney in New York. He'll be with you during any interviews. I can't afford—" "You're not paying. Consider it part of your hazard pay for running into burning buildings." Victoria softened her tone. "Please, let me do this." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Okay, thank you. The investigators might ask about your background, your finances, looking for motive. Is there anything I should know? Anything that might raise red flags?" "I'm broke. I work 2 jobs, and I have about $800 in savings. My credit is terrible because I had to declare bankruptcy 3 years ago when Sophie needed surgery and I didn't have insurance." Marcus's voice was flat, matter of fact. "If they're looking for someone desperate enough to commit arson for money, I probably fit the profile pretty well." Victoria's heart sank. He was right. On paper, Marcus Chen looked like someone who might be vulnerable to bribes or desperate enough to commit crimes. The investigators would see the financial pressure, the lack of resources, the access to the crime scene. They wouldn't see the man who'd risked his life without hesitation, who'd kept his voice calm and steady while carrying a terrified child through fire, who'd thought of someone else's daughter before his own safety. "I'll handle it," Victoria promised. "Just cooperate with the investigation, tell the truth, and let the lawyer do his job. This will blow over." But as she ended the call, Victoria wasn't sure she believed her own reassurances. Corporate investigations had a way of finding convenient scapegoats, and Marcus Chen was extremely convenient. Poor, powerless, unable to defend himself against a system designed to protect the wealthy and privileged, unless someone with wealth and privilege decided to defend him instead. Victoria pulled up her contacts and called her personal attorney. "Jonathan, I need you to recommend the best criminal defense lawyer you know. And I need you to start a quiet investigation into everyone who had a financial interest in disrupting the Hayes-Patterson merger. I want bank records, stock transactions, emails, everything." "Victoria, that's going to be expensive and time-consuming." "I don't care. Someone tried to burn down my building with my daughter inside. I want to know who, and I want them destroyed." Her voice could have cut glass. "And Jonathan, one more thing. I want a complete background check on Marcus Chen. Everything. Not because I suspect him, because I want to know who I'm defending." After handling the immediate crisis management, Victoria left the office early. Something she never did. She drove to Queens, to the address Marcus had given her driver Friday night. The neighborhood looked different in daylight, working class, but proud, with small shops and bustling sidewalks. She found Marcus's building and climbed 3 flights of stairs to his apartment. The hallway smelled of cooking, garlic, ginger, something warm and savory. Music drifted from behind various doors, lives stacked on top of each other in close quarters. Victoria knocked on 3C. After a moment, the door opened to reveal Marcus, shirtless with bandages wrapped around his torso and arms. Behind him, Victoria glimpsed a tiny apartment, a combination living room and kitchen barely bigger than her walk-in closet, with a small hallway presumably leading to a bedroom or two. "Victoria." Marcus's surprise was evident. "I wasn't expecting—" "Come in. Sorry, it's not much." Victoria stepped inside, and Marcus quickly grabbed a T-shirt from the back of a chair, wincing as he carefully pulled it over his bandages. The apartment was spotlessly clean, but worn, furnished with mismatched pieces that looked salvaged or second-hand. A small TV, an older laptop on a card table, a bookshelf made of cinder blocks and boards. But the walls were covered with drawings, children's art in wild colors, and imaginative scenes. Stick figures with huge smiles, rainbow houses, cats with 6 legs, each piece carefully framed in cheap plastic frames and hung with obvious pride. "Sophie's artwork," Marcus said, following Victoria's gaze. "She's very creative, wants to be an artist when she grows up. They're wonderful." Victoria meant it. The drawings radiated joy and imagination, the unself-conscious creativity of childhood. A door down the hallway opened, and a little girl emerged, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Sophie Chen was small for 7, with long black hair in a messy ponytail and her father's dark eyes. She wore princess pajamas and fuzzy slippers shaped like rabbits. "Dad, I heard voices." Sophie stopped when she saw Victoria, her eyes going wide. "Are you a princess?" Victoria found herself smiling despite the stress of the day. "No, sweetheart, just a friend of your dad's. My name is Victoria." "You look like a princess. Your clothes are shiny." Sophie padded closer, unafraid. "Did you know my dad is a hero? He saved a little girl from a fire. The news said so." "I know. He saved my little girl. Her name is Lily." Sophie's face lit up. "Is she 7 like me? Does she like to draw? Can she come over to play?" The innocent questions made Victoria's throat tight. When was the last time Lily had a play date? When had Victoria last arranged something as simple as 2 children playing together? "She is 7, and I think she'd like that very much," Victoria heard herself say. Marcus looked surprised but pleased. "Sophie, why don't you go get dressed? Maybe show Ms. Hayes some of your new drawings." Sophie nodded enthusiastically and scampered back down the hallway. Marcus turned to Victoria, keeping his voice low. "You didn't have to come here. I wanted to see how you were doing. And I wanted to tell you in person. My investigator is already digging into the corporate side of this. We're going to find whoever really started that fire. You're spending a lot of money and effort on someone you barely know." You're not someone I barely know anymore. You're the person who saved my daughter's life." Victoria met his eyes steadily. "And maybe you're someone who's reminding me what really matters. Before the fire, I would have said my company was everything. But when I thought Lily was trapped up there, when I couldn't get to her," she had to pause, collect herself. "Nothing else mattered. Not the merger, not the stock price, not the empire I'd built, just her." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's how it works. Everything else is just noise." Sophie returned, carrying a sketchbook that she thrust at Victoria with unself-conscious pride. "Look, I drew the fire trucks from TV." Victoria sat on the worn couch and examined the drawing. Fire trucks rendered in bright red crayon, firefighters with yellow helmets, flames shooting from windows in orange and yellow. It was surprisingly detailed for a 7-year-old, showing real observation and artistic instinct. "This is really good, Sophie. You're very talented. Dad says I should practice every day if I want to get better at something." Sophie climbed onto the couch next to Victoria, completely comfortable with this stranger in expensive clothes. "Do you practice things?" "I practice running a company. I practice making decisions. I practice being a mum to Lily, though I'm not always very good at it." "I bet you're good. Mums are always good at mom stuff. That's what Mrs. Chen downstairs says." Sophie's innocent observation hit harder than she could know. Victoria spent an hour at the apartment, sitting on the worn couch while Sophie showed her drawings and chattered about school and her favorite things. Marcus made tea, cheap grocery store brand, but served carefully in clean mugs, and watched his daughter interact with the billionaire CEO as if they were just two people sharing her afternoon. It was the most normal Victoria had felt in years. As she prepared to leave, Sophie hugged her spontaneously, her small arms wrapping around Victoria's waist. "Thank you for coming to visit. Will you bring Lily next time?" "I will," Victoria promised, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Marcus walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. The legal help, the medical bills. Coming here, you didn't have to do any of it." "Yes, I did." Victoria paused in the doorway, looking back at the small apartment with its careful cleanliness and walls full of love. "You have something here that I've been trying to buy with money for 7 years. Sophie feels secure, loved, happy. That's worth more than any penthouse or corner office. You have that with Lily too. I saw it at the hospital, the way she held on to you, the way you wouldn't let her go. That's real. I need to do better. Be more present. Stop trying to prove something to people whose opinions don't matter." Victoria's voice was thoughtful. "This fire, maybe it was meant to destroy things, but maybe it's also showing me what actually needed to change." She left the building and climbed into her waiting car, her driver discreetly ignoring the fact that his boss had just emerged from a walk-up in Queens, looking thoughtful and slightly undone. Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from her investigator. "Found something interesting. Call me." She dialed immediately. Jonathan's voice was tight with excitement. "Victoria, you're going to want to hear this. I pulled financial records on everyone connected to the merger, and there's a problem. Someone's been making very large, very suspicious stock purchases, betting against Hayes Technologies. And Victoria, it's coming from inside the company." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Who?" "That's where it gets complicated. The transactions are buried under shell corporations and offshore accounts, but I tracked them back to someone with intimate knowledge of your company's operations. Someone who knew about the merger, knew about the gala, knew when and where to strike for maximum damage." "Give me a name, Jonathan." "I can't. Not yet. But Victoria, whoever this is, they're smart, well-connected, and they've been planning this for a long time. The fire wasn't opportunistic, it was calculated, and I don't think they're done." The call ended, leaving Victoria staring at her phone with a growing sense of dread. Someone inside her company, someone she trusted, someone who'd been willing to risk lives, to endanger children, all for profit. And somehow, impossibly, Marcus Chen was connected to this, not as the perpetrator. She was certain of that now, but as something else. A piece of a puzzle Victoria was just beginning to see. That night, after Lily was asleep, Victoria opened her laptop and began researching. She pulled every record she could find on Marcus Chen, looking for connections she might have missed. And that's when she found it. Buried in old employment records, in background checks from 3 years ago when he'd first been hired. A detail so small that no one had paid attention to it, but now it lit up Victoria's mind like a flare. Marcus Chen's mother's maiden name, Hayes, the same last name as Victoria's company. The same last name that Victoria herself had taken from her maternal grandmother when she'd been disowned by her parents, choosing a new identity to build her empire. Could it be coincidence? In a city of millions, was it possible that Marcus Chen shared a last name with her company by pure chance? Or was there a connection neither of them knew about? A thread running back through time, linking their families in ways that would explain everything: the fire, the investigation, and most impossibly of all, why Marcus Chen had been there at exactly the right moment to save her daughter's life. Victoria's hands were shaking as she pulled up genealogy databases, as she started tracing family trees back through decades. If she was right, if her growing suspicion was correct, then everything was about to change, because sometimes the most important connections in our lives aren't random at all. Sometimes they've been there all along, buried under years of secrets and silence, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And that moment, Victoria was beginning to understand, was now. Victoria's investigator called at 2 in the morning with news that made her blood run cold. "I found the person behind the shell corporations." "Victoria, you need to sit down for this." "Just tell me, Jonathan." "It's Patricia Montero, your event coordinator. But she's not working alone. She's connected to your father's investment firm." "Victoria, your parents have been secretly buying up Hayes Technology stock through intermediaries for the past 18 months. They're positioning for a hostile takeover." The room spun. Her parents, the people who disowned her 7 years ago, were trying to destroy what she'd built. The fire was their doing? Patricia confessed an hour ago. Your father paid her $200,000 to start the fire during the gala, creating chaos that would tank your stock price and damage your reputation. They didn't know Lily would be there. That wasn't part of the plan. When Patricia realized a child was in danger, she tried to call it off, but it was too late. Victoria felt sick. Her own parents had nearly killed their granddaughter, a child they'd never met, all to reclaim control over the daughter who'd defied them. "There's more," Jonathan continued. "When I was investigating your family history, I found something about Marcus Chen. Victoria, his grandmother was Elizabeth Hayes, your grandmother's younger sister. Marcus is your second cousin. Your families have been connected all along." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't a random janitor. He was family. Blood family who'd been working in her building for 3 years while she treated him as invisible. Elizabeth Hayes disappeared from family records in 1962, Jonathan explained. "She married a Chinese immigrant named Chen Wei against your great-grandparents' wishes and was disowned, just like you were." The pattern repeats. Victoria's hands trembled. "Does Marcus know?" "I don't think so. His mother died when he was young, and his father rarely spoke about the American side of the family. But Victoria, this explains why your father targeted Marcus in the investigation. He recognized the Hayes connection and wanted to frame Marcus to eliminate any claim to the family legacy. Everything clicked into place. The convenient evidence pointing toward Marcus. The pressure on investigators to arrest him quickly. Her father's ruthless efficiency in destroying anyone who threatened his control. "I'm releasing everything to the police," Victoria said, her voice hard as steel. "My parents, Patricia, everyone involved. They tried to murder my daughter. I don't care if they're family. Already done. Arrests are being made as we speak." Victoria ended the call and sat in the darkness of her penthouse, processing the truth. Marcus Chen, the man who'd saved her daughter, was the family she'd been denied. The connection she'd been searching for had been there all along, cleaning her floors while she'd built her empire in isolation. The next morning, she drove back to Queens. Marcus opened his door to find Victoria standing there, tears streaming down her face. "We're family," she said without preamble. "Your grandmother Elizabeth was my grandmother Margaret's sister. We're second cousins, Marcus. We've been family this whole time." She watched the information process across his face. Shock, confusion, then dawning understanding. "The Hayes name," he said slowly. "My mother used to say we came from a wealthy family that disowned her mother for marrying a Chinese man. I never knew the details. She died when I was 12. And my family has a pattern of destroying anyone who doesn't conform to their expectations." Victoria's voice broke. "They disowned me for keeping Lily. They disowned your grandmother for marrying for love. And Marcus, they're the ones who started the fire. My father orchestrated everything, the arson, trying to frame you, all of it. He wanted to take back control of my company and eliminate any Hayes family members who might threaten his legacy." Marcus stumbled backward, sitting heavily on his worn couch. "Your father tried to kill his own granddaughter. He didn't know she'd be there. Not that it excuses anything." Victoria sat beside him, the expensive fabric of her suit incongruous against his threadbare furniture. "The police arrested him and Patricia an hour ago. It's over. But why frame me? I'm nobody. Because you're not nobody. You're a Hayes. Even if you didn't know it, even if you never claimed it, you represented everything my father hates. Someone who chose integrity over wealth, who built a life on their own terms, who couldn't be controlled." Victoria took his hand. "And because you saved his granddaughter, proving that the people he'd discarded were worth more than he'd ever be." Sophie appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Dad, why is everyone crying?" Marcus pulled his daughter onto his lap, holding her close. "Sometimes grown-ups cry because they're happy, sweetheart. Victoria just told me that we're family. She's like our cousin." "Really?" Sophie's face lit up. "Does that mean Lily is my cousin too?" "Yes," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "That means Lily is your cousin, and if you want, you can be real sisters in every way that matters." The revelation transformed everything. Victoria immediately moved Marcus and Sophie into her building, not out of charity, but because they were family. She set up a trust fund for Sophie's education and offered Marcus a position as director of building operations, a role that recognized his knowledge and capabilities. But more importantly, she invited them into her life. Real family dinners, playdates between Sophie and Lily, holidays spent together instead of in lonely isolation. Marcus hesitated at first, uncomfortable with accepting so much, but Victoria was insistent. "My grandmother Margaret spent her whole life regretting that she never fought for her sister Elizabeth. She told me before she died that abandoning family was her greatest sin. I won't make the same mistake. This isn't charity, Marcus. This is correcting a wrong that's been happening for 60 years. The two girls bonded instantly, as if their blood connection was visible to them in ways the adults had missed. Lily, usually so reserved, chattered excitedly with Sophie about drawings and favorite colors. Sophie, naturally empathetic, seemed to instinctively understand Lily's need for routine and gentle approaches. Watching them together, Victoria finally understood what she'd been missing. Not business success or social status, but connection, family, belonging. 6 months after the fire, Victoria stood in the Hayes Technologies boardroom with Marcus at her side, addressing the assembled board of directors. Her parents were in prison, awaiting trial. Patricia had turned state's evidence, and Hayes Technologies had emerged stronger than ever, the attempted sabotage backfiring spectacularly when the public learned the truth. "I'm announcing a new initiative today," Victoria said, her voice clear and confident. "The Hayes Family Foundation, dedicated to supporting families torn apart by poverty, discrimination, or impossible choices. Because I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up when it matters most." Marcus had shown up. A man who owed her nothing had risked everything to save her daughter, and in doing so, he'd saved Victoria too. From a life of isolation, from repeating her family's mistakes, from believing that success meant standing alone. My co-director for this foundation is Marcus Chen Hayes, Victoria continued, and Marcus stood beside her, still uncomfortable in his new suit, but standing tall. He's family by blood and by choice, and together we're going to make sure that no one else has to choose between love and survival the way our grandmothers did. The board applauded. In the audience, Sophie and Lily sat together, holding hands and whispering to each other. Two 7-year-old girls who would grow up knowing that family meant showing up, fighting for each other, and never giving up on love. After the meeting, Victoria found Marcus standing at the window of her office, looking out over Manhattan. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if there hadn't been a fire?" she asked. "Sometimes, but then I think maybe the fire didn't create anything new. Maybe it just revealed what was already there, waiting to be discovered." Marcus turned to face her. "We were family all along, Victoria. We just didn't know it yet. My grandmother Margaret left me a letter before she died. I found it last week while going through old documents." Victoria pulled a yellowed envelope from her desk drawer. She wrote, "The greatest tragedy of my life was losing Elizabeth. Not because our parents demanded it, but because I didn't fight hard enough to keep her. If you ever get a second chance at family, Victoria, don't let fear or pride make you repeat my mistakes. Choose love, choose connection, choose to show up." "She would have loved knowing we found each other," Marcus said softly. "She would have loved you, just like Elizabeth would have been proud of the man you became. Someone who runs into fires to save strangers, who raises an incredible daughter alone, who never let poverty or struggle make him bitter." Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. "You're everything our family should have been, but wasn't, until now." That evening, the four of them, Victoria, Marcus, Lily and Sophie, had dinner together in Victoria's penthouse. Not a formal affair, but pizza and laughter. Two girls giggling over shared jokes, two adults watching them and marveling at how quickly life could change. "Dad," Sophie said as Marcus tucked her into the guest bedroom later, "are we going to live here forever? Would you like that?" "Yeah. Lily's my best friend now, and Victoria makes you smile more." Sophie's innocent observation carried profound truth. Marcus kissed her forehead. "Then yes, sweetheart, we're home." In the living room, Victoria sat with Lily curled against her side, finally understanding what her grandmother had tried to tell her. Success wasn't measured in stock prices or business deals. It was measured in moments like this: a child feeling safe, a family finally complete, love chosen over fear. The fire had taken a building floor and nearly taken lives, but it had also burned away the barriers that had kept two branches of a family separated for 60 years. It had revealed that the janitor Victoria had never noticed was the family she'd always needed. That heroism wasn't about wealth or power, but about choosing to show up when it mattered most. Marcus Chen had run into a fire to save a stranger's child. In doing so, he'd saved them all, from loneliness, from repeating old mistakes, from living half-lives in separate worlds. Sometimes the greatest rescues aren't from burning buildings. Sometimes they're from the isolation we build around ourselves, the walls we erect to keep from being hurt. And sometimes the person who saves you is someone you've overlooked 1,000 times, someone whose true value was hidden by circumstance and assumption. Victoria looked at Marcus sitting across the room, watching their daughters play together, and thought about fate, about second chances, about families torn apart and brought back together by fire and courage and grace. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving Lily, for saving me, for being the family I didn't know I was missing." Marcus met her eyes and smiled. "We saved each other, Victoria. That's what family does." And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and love, Victoria finally understood that she'd built her empire on the wrong foundation. The real treasure wasn't in boardrooms or bank accounts. It was here, in this room, in these connections, in choosing to show up for each other day after day. The Hayes family, broken 60 years ago by pride and prejudice, was finally whole again. Not because of money or power, but because a janitor and a CEO had both learned the same lesson. that heroism is choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, and family over everything else. The fire had revealed the truth. Now it was up to them to keep that truth alive, to make sure the next generation never had to choose between love and legacy. And as Sophie and Lily giggled together, planning tomorrow's adventures, Victoria knew they would succeed, because they'd already done the hardest part. They'd shown up for each other when it mattered most. Everything else was just details.